So now we will go on with the poster competition award ceremony. So let me introduce the chair of this session, Professor Mark James, who is a professor of sports law and director of research and knowledge exchange at Manchester Law School. So Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Costa. Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. Thank you very much, Costa, for inviting me to chair this session and the scrutiny panel for the poster competition. It was myself, along with Dr. Donato Bozza from the University of Roehampton and Dr. Dawn Carpenter from Georgetown University, and myself, who had the pleasure and the honour of assessing the poster competition this year. And we had some very, very good submissions, all of very high quality, and I'm very pleased to be able to introduce, I'll do so in a bit more detail shortly, but Benedetta Barozzi, Beatrice Sartori and Demet Altunay as three of the very best of the posters that we had submitted to the competition. Would like to begin by congratulating everyone who submitted and for their time and effort for making such interesting and eye-catching posters and the narratives that went with it. Today we're going to have presentations from the three people I just mentioned. The way we're going to run this is that I will shortly I'll share my screen so that there are presentations of the three posters. I'll then introduce each of them before they speak, and then hand over the floor to them, and they will have around 5 minutes to speak to their posters and explain in a little bit more detail what it's about and what they're hoping to achieve. Unfortunately, our overall winner, Benedetta Sartor, is unable to be with us today, but I will show her a poster and just give a few comments of what the judging panel thought of it before we wrap up. If there is any time left over for questions at the end, I'm sure that people will either be able to raise their hands or post something on the chat. But hopefully the posters will spark some thoughts. I think they're very interesting and quite innovative in the way that they've been presented. Each of them in very different in their style and their approach, including some excellent use of graphics and very, very good visual and powerful images in some of the cases as to what they're trying to do and why they're trying to do it. Rather than try and explain in the abstract what they're all about, let's actually have a look at what the posters are themselves. So I will now share my screen. I think that means that most of us will disappear, but I'll bring everyone back in at the end. We'll start with Benedetta, then Beatrice, then Demet in that order. So hope you're all ready, and I will call you in a second. Let me just bring up my screen.
My microphone isn't working properly. I couldn't hear anything. Hello?
Is that a problem? Can people not hear me?
Hello, no, I think that Georgina is one of the panelists. Georgina, we are now working on another panel, so we can check your microphone at the end of this panel, okay? Thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks, Costa, and we'll begin with Benedetta Barozzi. She was just outside the top three, and we felt, though, her presentation deserved a special mention. Benedetta has recently graduated from the University of Padua, having defended her thesis on patent protection of COVID-19 vaccines and health emergencies. So obviously incredibly pertinent to the times that we're in at the moment. Her research focused her research focused on the relationship between patent protection and the right to health and examining the legal solutions to balance these contracting rights. She's currently working at the International as the International Service Officer at the Inner Wheel Club, and her poster considers the contract secrecy in a pandemic. So obviously draws from the work on her thesis. Benedetta, I will hand over to you now.
Thank you, Professor James, and thank you all for having me today. So the poster I submitted for the competition, titled Whistling at Contract Secrecy in a Pandemic Scenario, aims to analyze the relationship between contract secrecy and misinformation in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic. At the very beginning of the pandemic, the European Commission entered into some advanced purchase agreements with the pharmaceutical companies producing the vaccines. However, these contracts were subject to some confidentiality clauses, which basically prevent their publication without the pharmaceutical company prior consent. Although we can say that such clauses are considered as a standard practice in order to protect the commercial interest of the companies, two problems arise from this secrecy. The first problem concerns the public. In fact, during the pandemic, we all have witnessed the proliferation of misinformation and fake news concerning various aspects of the vaccines, from their chemical composition to the terms and clauses included in the contracts stipulated for their supply. In front of tons of fake news, I believe it's essential to consider the role that the so-called fact-checking can play. Fact-checking is basically about disproving fake news by comparing them with real data. But the secrecy of the contracts has prevented the institutions from being able to carry out an effective fact-checking campaign, thus creating a vacuum of information that can and has been easily filled with fake news, increasing the phenomenon of vaccine hesitancy, which has been identified by the World Health Organization as one of the top 10 threats to global health in 2019, so even before the pandemic, and jeopardizing to a greater or lesser extent the vaccination campaign, the success of which strongly rely on citizens' trust in the institutions. As we can see from the graphic I have included in my poster, the graphic shows that countries with a higher level of trust in the institutions also have a higher mean vaccine uptake over low trust countries. The second problem arising from contract secrecy concerns the conflict between such clauses, the principle of transparency, which require every European decision to be taken as openly as possible, and the right that every European citizen has to access the documents of the institutions. The right to access documents of the institutions is in fact regulated by Article 42 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, allowing for a broad public participation. In this regard, reference may be made to Article 4 of the EC Regulation 1049/2001, which states that the right of access to documents may be limited if those documents contain confidential commercial information, the disclosure of which could harm the interest of a party. The limitation described in Article 4, however, can only be applied if there is no overriding public interest in the disclosure of the documents. The question I've therefore asked myself at the end of my work is, since the limit established by Article 4 can be applied only where it does not conflict with a higher public interest, could the need to operate a fact-checking on fake news be precisely that higher public interest? I believe the answer to that question relies mostly on each case. For example, in countries where vaccination rates are lower, it could be important to operate the said fact-checking, or at least to allow access to those who qualify as citizens' representatives. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Benedetta, and absolutely spot on time as well. Absolutely fascinating subject area, and something that we've all become, unfortunately, very familiar with over the last couple of years. So thank you very much for introducing us to your ideas there. Okay, next up, we have the person that was in third place in our competition, which is Beatrice Sartori. Beatrice also graduated from the University of Padua, and she is now working as a trainee lawyer at Madra Mason and Partners in Venice, specialising in labour disputes and immigration law. Her poster draws on this expertise, in particular in respect of employment law, labour law, and how disinformation can affect the rating systems on platform workers. So every time that we are using the gig economy and rating someone, that's really what Beatrice is interested in looking at in terms of the disinformation and how that can affect their jobs. So Beatrice, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor James, for your kind introduction, and thank you also to Professor Bianchini and others for the kind words. So good afternoon. I just want to say that I'm very happy to be here. I'm glad to participate at this conference. Well, about my research, it is focused on how rating systems work in platform economy and their effect upon workers. Rating systems are typical of food delivery platforms and taxi service platforms. We can see that there are three actors: the algorithm implemented by the platform, the employer, customers, and workers. The platform requires customers to give a score about the service received. The problem is that this score affects immediately the worker that provided that service. This means that workers are assessed by opinions and expectations not considerable as an objective valuation of their work. For this reason, it's possible to talk about disinformation, because the comments or scores that customers are invited to provide on a worker's performance are completely personal and arbitrary. This behavior has no consequences upon customers, and moreover, there is no fact-checking upon these valuations. As a result, the algorithm that can't understand the difference uses these assessments to organize operation and promote workers with highest score. In this way, on one hand, customers believe to receive the best service, and platforms can lead to better economic investment. But on the other hand, this mechanism can be very dangerous for workers' dignity and rights. Above all, platforms can exert a control power on workers' performances quality by asking customers to review each part of the service received. If this control is invasive and intentional, we can consider it as a direct control, and it is not permitted by Italian legislation unless if approved by labor union representative as established by Article 4 of the Statute of Workers at the first paragraph. The AI technology uses also rates to exert disciplinary power. In fact, under a predetermined average of scores, the worker's account is automatically turned off. That basically means to be fired without any possibility of a inner appeal. This is not acceptable because disciplinary power needs to be proportionate. Furthermore, in this way, it seems to be the customer, the one who has the power to decide upon worker contractual relationship because of feedbacks. This tool allows also to collect personal information about workers' private life, causing obviously privacy injury. As such, there are 3 European legislations useful to prevent this risk. The first is Regulation 679 of 2016 about privacy and data collection, focused on the right of access and information about data collection. In fact, each worker must receive a clear and detailed description concerning data use and collection, and they must be able to correct and update those personal data. It would be also important to grant workers' right of portability of their own rating. The second one is the Directive 958 of 2019 that established a proportionality test that can be used to plan a more proportionate disciplinary power. At least the Directive 1937 of 2019 is about whistleblowing cases not reported yet, but extremely important in order to ensure protection. In conclusion, it's important to underline that automatic rating system shall not be allowed to function without any human control, so as to minimize the consequences of subjective assessments. In order to find a balance, it is possible to authorize just an indirect control upon workers that means more general and occasional supervision activities. In this way, assessments can be less dangerous and workers are less damaged by misinformation and disinformation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Beatrice. Another excellent presentation about something which we probably all take for granted when we're just using our phones to order things and then to give instant feedback, maybe without thinking about what the repercussions of that are. So an absolutely fascinating area. Thank you. And finally, for today, our second place presentation is from Demet Altunay. I will show this before you speak, Demet. I'll actually run it through so that people can see, because we felt that this was a really technically innovative poster and using great use of the fact that we're online rather than simply the kind of paper-based poster that we would normally have if it was this was at a formal conference. Demet is also studying at the University of Padua, but for an MBA in management, having previously been awarded a Bachelor of Economics from the Middle East Technical University. She's a contributor to the Corporate Social Responsibility and Business Ethics blog, and today is going to be presenting on some of the work that Carol Cadwallader has done, and the topic is Silence to Democracy. I will just run this through because it's just a little bit more interactive.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me as a panelist to the final conference of this amazing research project and giving me the opportunity to present my poster. I'm very pleased to be with you here today. While preparing this poster, I got inspired by the brave investigative journalist Carol Cadwallader. Cadwallader is the one who exposed harvesting of personal Facebook data for the political campaign in 2016, which is also known as Cambridge Analytica scandal. Cadwallader's investigation on vote-leave campaign has started with identifying concerns created on Facebook through several unreferenced advertisements, which had also potential to create hate and fear among people. Surprisingly, only some parts of the society were facing with these ads, and Cadwallader calls this part of society who are manipulated on Facebook as persuadables. You can see them at the bottom of my poster. The votes of these people were not made under informed basis, but rather by spreading disinformation on Facebook through several advertisements. The evidence for unreferenced fake news on Facebook that Cadwallader showed in her TED Talk was truly shocking. Carol mentioned how Facebook identifies individuals concerned with immigration before bombarding them with targeted advertisements. After the identification process of these people, they started bombarding them with unreferenced fake news regarding the possibility of Turkey joining the European Union and the subsequent migration of the Turkish citizens to the United Kingdom. Of course, these advertisements were far from the reality of the situation. And most of the times we are liking, commenting, and sharing the post with our friends and families without even realizing how our actions on social media can be used to manipulate us. As Carol had claimed during the TED Talk, this entire referendum took place in darkness because it took place on Facebook. That is why my poster is mainly dark colored and why there is a stamp on a piece of vote paper saying that this is approved by Facebook. I believe that this darkness can only be enlightened by the brave investigative journalists and the public interest defenders. The light at the top of my poster, held by a hand, represents how silencing journalism can plunge the entire society into the darkness and leads democratic elections to be undermined. My aim while preparing this poster was to draw attention to the contradiction of the states, which claim to be democratic in nature, yet where freedom of the press is not adequately protected and freedom of expression for the benefit of society is considered as a crime. In the absence of these freedoms, the implementations of the meaningful free elections will not be possible, of course. Democracy imprisoned in a vote box during the referendum symbolizes this fact, and its lock symbolizes the monetary power of the individuals or companies like Aaron Banks in the case of the Carol Cadwalder, who may use the legal system to threaten and punish journalists. It is called as SLAP in law, strategic lawsuits against the public participation. It is important to keep in mind that the full exercise of the freedom to impart information and ideas allows free criticism and questioning of the government, and gives voters the opportunity to make informed choices during the elections. I have also written a blog article which is titled as The Business of Silencing Journalists and Its Harm to Democratic Environment by observing the case of Carol Cadwalder. It is published on the Corporate Social Responsibility and Business Ethics blog, which Dr. Costantino Grasso is the chief editor. I dedicate both my article and my poster to all investigative and brave journalists and public interest defenders who face challenges and even risk their lives to speak truth. As being a part of this society, I believe we all have a responsibility to promote human rights and to safeguard democracy and its institutions. As Carol Cadwalder has told at the end of her TED talk, democracy is not guaranteed and it is not inevitable. We have to fight and we have to win. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Demet, and a very important presentation there, and highlighting the work of what somebody I think is an absolutely excellent journalist whose work is really not quite appreciated yet, though, as many of my fellow Britons are starting to realise, has been speaking truth to power for a long time, and only now are the repercussions of Brexit being felt by people who thought it was going to be such a good idea by believing the kind of things that were being peddled on Facebook. So thank you very much for that, Demet. It was a fascinating discussion. Finally, unfortunately, Benedetta Sartor, our winner, can't be here today due to work commitments. She's another graduate from the Faculty of Law at the University of Padua, so they've had a clean sweep of our top 4 places in this competition. And she's currently working at the Intesa San Paolo Vita. Her thesis examined social network society and the criminal and civil liabilities of the use of these platforms, which has obviously influenced her poster, which looks at fake news and social networks as an overview of the periods before and after the pandemic. What we particularly liked about this poster was its clarity of presentation, the cleanliness of the way it's being presented, and we like the innovative imagery as well as making it look like the phone screens of the phones that you would be receiving your fake news on. We also thought the clarity of the message was excellent, providing the 3 separate sections as to what the research was about, how it was done, and the results of it. And it provides a very distinct and clear messaging, which was very much what we were after. So although all 4 of the 3 presentations we've heard today, and the 4th one that you've got before you, were all absolutely excellent, and we're really pleased that you took the time and effort to come in. This was the one that we felt was the best of them all. Thank you once again to everyone. Let me just stop sharing so we can all come back. Thank you very much to everyone who submitted a poster, and in particular to Benedetta, Beatrice and Demet, who have presented theirs today. I hope you found them as interesting as Dawn, Donato and me did, going through them and judging them. I'm not sure if there's time for questions, Costa, or are we up against the time limit?
We are a bit over time, but maybe only one question. If there is a question, we can go through.
Does anybody have any questions? I'm just looking on the chat, there's none in there. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask any of our presenters? I can't see anything coming through, so unless Costa or Stephen, you can. thanks, Costa, for inviting me to chair this panel and to chair the judging panel. It was the presentation that we've seen today are indicative of those that were submitted, and the way that they have engaged with issues that are of such contemporary importance. I think all of the presenters ought to be congratulated on that. The issue of fake news is obviously a massive problem. The way that that has impacted both on democracy and on people's health in relation to the vaccine. And something I've never thought of in respect of the impact that our often unthinking grading of someone's performance when they have been working in the gig economy and the impact that that could have are such important issues for us all to be aware of. So congratulations once again, and thank you to everyone who submitted the poster.
So thank you very much to all the participants. Thank you very much, Mark, for brilliantly moderating this panel, and thank you again to Professor Mark James, Dr. Don Carpenter, and Dr. Donato Bozza for being part of the evaluating panel. Thank you very much. So now I will pause the recording for just 5 minutes because we are a bit over time, and then there will be the last panel about the potential solutions before the final remarks that Professor Diane Ring will offer. So let's reconvene in 5 minutes.